Well, let me go ahead and get started with the class tonight. So I just want to give you a little bit of overview. Really, everyone's been in a class before except the Muellers, so it's really for you guys. But basically, logistically, the essence of the class is just about 5 to 10 minutes of teaching, and then trying to leave as much space as available to let you guys interact. What I do is I break you guys up into random small groups and let you interact about the subject matter that I teach on, and then let you guys really engage it at a deeper level. And it seemed to work really well in the last few classes because every time I break up the rooms and get people to come back, they're still talking. They act like they're praying when I bring them back, but in fact, they're still talking and engaging. So I think it's a really good format for you guys to really make this your own, because ultimately, that's what I want to see. And I compare it to a lot of the guys did Growing Kids God's Way with me, and that was 18 weeks of really heavy teaching. And even though it was, I think really good, there was so much teaching. It was like drinking from a fire hose. You couldn't possibly keep it all. And I don't think, as much as I would like to think, I don't think a lot of it stuck. I mean, obviously some of it did, but it was just so much information. It was hard to really own. And ultimately, that's what I want to see, is that you guys take this stuff and really own it. So for those of you who've already gone through Growing Kids God's Way, a lot of this, I wouldn't say a lot, I'd say at least a third to one half is going to be a refresher course for you guys. And then some of it's going to be brand new. So any questions? So this class is really broken up into 3 phases. So even though it's a marriage class, it's a parenting class. It starts with the first 3 sessions are all about you and your marriage, because ultimately you guys are more important than your kids. You as a couple and your individual relationships with God are more important than your children. So if anybody's offended by that, you may want to click off now, because so many young families make their whole life around their kids. And then I'm going to be the first to tell you, 25 years later, you wake up and you're staring at somebody going, who are you? So it's really important that you guys focus on your marriage, focus on God first and your individual relationship with Him, focus on your marriage, and then your kids actually will feel more secure because your marriage is more secure. So the first session 2 and 3 are about you. Then we get into some real practical parenting tips that mainly I lifted from Growing Kids God's Way. And then the last 3 sessions are more about creating some new strategies for your family to adopt and adapt to some of the things that we've talked about. So that's the class structure moving forward. Again, if you have any questions, stop me at any time. The first session tonight is about really starting with why. I don't know if any of you business folks have ever read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. We as parents so often hate that word. How many of us hear that word a lot from our kids? And what happens is, over time, we crush that spirit, that inquisitiveness, and just make them stop asking. And then what happens is they start adopting some of the things that you want them to, but they never really understand why. And at the end of the day, that's why they go crazy when they go to college or go off the rails in high school, because they've never really had the opportunity to understand why Jesus is important, why your family might be different than others. And what you don't want to do is create a legalistic system that they have to adhere to so that when they finally are able to make a decision for themselves, they go sideways, because it never really was, they were never really afforded the opportunity to ask why. So tonight we're going to talk about that. First of all, I want to just talk about scripturally why it's important for you guys to be the great parents that God's calling you to be. First of all, children are a gift from God. Psalm 127:3 says, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. They will bring joy, even though often you don't believe that. Proverbs 23:24-25 says, the father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. May your father and mother rejoice. May she who gave you birth be joyful. And I'm proud that two of my kids are in this group, and I'm very proud of them, and I'm that guy. I get to have the joy of having my kids be involved in this. Not that I did all the right things, for sure, but it's such a blessing to be able to see your kids come up and actually embrace your faith. Now it's their faith. Kids and meeting, Psalm 127:4-5. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. God says, be fruitful and multiply. Sammy and Natalie, it's time to multiply. I won't go into that. They will help you grow in responsibility and help decrease your selfishness. If anybody doesn't believe that, any parents doesn't believe that if you're going to be selfish, your kids are going to be terrors. So you have to be selfless to be a great parent, but you also have to model that for your children so they don't become selfish. Basically, by loving our children, and really starting by loving God and loving our spouses, we learn how to love. Ephesians 5:1-2 says, follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love as Jesus Christ loves us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. God is always working in your life to make you into the image of Christ. Children will help you grow as a Christian. James 1:2-4 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. One of the things we'll cover in session 3 is conflict resolution. It's something that so many people avoid, conflict, and rarely strategically try to resolve it. And then again, what you do is you teach your kids to avoid conflict and stuff. It's just like avoiding the why. Then they start making up the rules themselves, and they learn not to confront issues. So that's going to be a big topic in session 3. Kids make you healthier, and you get to share the faith and become a great evangelist. In session 8 and 9, we're going to finish the class by talking about how you guys can personally have a family Bible study, a family meeting weekly, and actually become the teachers of the Word. That prior to COVID, we may have relied more on Sunday school and church, and now, you guys are the priests of your home, so it's up to you guys to actually start teaching your kids and making them able to understand how to apply the Word to daily life. So that's going to be where we end this class, is actually practically talking about implementing some Bible study for you and your family in your home. Any questions? So I'm going to break you guys up into small groups, and I'm going to actually let Zoom break you up randomly. So I have no idea who you're going to be with. And you're going to just talk about the questions. First of all, does everybody have the PDF and the website? So it'll be, the questions start on the bottom of page 6 and go through page 7. There's 4 questions with a little paragraph in each. So I want you guys to talk about a culture of question and answers in your home. Are you willing to shift gears? And I know this is difficult for people that have really little kids, but it doesn't take long for your kids to start interacting around God. They don't have to be that old. So even though you think they might be too young, it's really critical that you start modeling what it means to use Jesus as your moral compass and your tool. So you're going to talk about establishing that culture. You're going to talk about, practical ways to inspire your kids to ask better questions. One thing that I've really been challenged with over the last, 4 or 5 months is realizing that even as a teacher, I don't ask a lot of questions. I teach, I dictate, so to say, but I don't engage people with questions often. And that's one of the reasons I've created this study the way I have, so you guys can engage each other and ask questions. Sometimes we just need to spend more time, especially with children, asking questions instead of telling them what to do. If you guys would take the time, and this is going to be a theme throughout this study, is your time, how busy you are, how your priorities might be out of whack. And when you have kids, life is crazy. I know it's busy, but if we don't slow down and deal with our children in a slow, calm pace, you can't do the things we're going to talk about. So one of the foundational principles in this study is going to talk about, are you taking the time with your family, with your spouse first, with God first, obviously, your spouse second, and then with your kids. And so if in order to ask better questions and calm down a little bit, you got to first step back and maybe get a little less busy. How often do you praise your kids? We're going to talk about how to correct your kids in later sessions, but part of that has to be coupled with more praise. And it's not false praise. It's not just like everybody gets a trophy praise, but it's really looking for positive things and looking for their gifts. It's almost never too early to really start honing in on what your kids' giftings are. And then really, you think about it, if you try to mold your kid into you, which so many parents do, they try to make them the great football star they never were, or, in Nathan's case, the great soccer star. But it never works because they're just not necessarily wired exactly like us. So to find out who they are and really engage that and embrace it, and even do weird things, that maybe you're not comfortable with, that they want. So learning how to praise them more and understand them more. And then, truly respecting, first of all, respecting each other and respecting God, and then respecting your children. Again, I was the one that was always busy, and sadly, often I felt like my kids were they were in the way. They were in the way for me being able to get whatever I wanted to get done. And if they were busy with me, everything was good. But if they got in my way, as much as I tried, I would just, and it was my problem was I overscheduled everything, and I know you guys are even busier than I was back in the day, but that is how all these things fall through the cracks. You can't really praise them and really understand them if you don't take the time to know your kids. So, all right. So for homework this week, what I want you to do is, if you talk about the journal, the Bible study, the journaling thing, but again, it's not a priority. I think it'll help if you're not already doing something. I want you to read back through the scriptures that I breezed through real quick on page 6 and 7, and just talk about, are you guys a good role model? Are you actually living out something you would want your kids to emulate? And I got to be honest, that was probably the biggest turning point in my life. Somebody challenged me with that. I think Chris was about 5, and I wasn't living a life that I would ever want him to live. And I wasn't even a believer yet, but that question really challenged me. And I've used that all through my life, because when I'm not acting like what I want my kids to emulate, I got to question, what am I doing? And you think about those times where you scream, or you get angry, or you get frustrated, road rage. I mean, how many times do we model really bad behavior in front of our kids and then wonder why they might be disrespectful or frustrating to be around at times? We're all frustrating to be around. So, I want you as couples to really challenge each other to be the best role models, and, come up with ways where you can talk it through and not ignore, again, we'll talk about conflict in one of these sessions, but not ignore some of this stuff, but really challenge each other to step it up, not fake it, but to really make some shifts in your life. And that's why, again, the Bible study part will be really important. So those are some interesting and tough questions to ask about what kind of example you are of living out a life that Jesus would be proud of.